Alright, welcome to my panel, Posing, Theory and Practice. This is basically a much more in-depth panel and differently constructed panel based on a lot of my previous things that you may have seen at AWA or MomoCon. And basically this one's going to be more so into the theory of how posing fits your character, why certain things work, and why they look good on camera. The thrust of this is going to be for people interested in cosplay and cosplay being a model themselves, or rather that's how I'm going to phrase it. But I do believe that this kind of thing is just as important a skill for photographers to be cognizant of, because lots of models are less experienced, things like that, and being able to help pose people, help give advice, or when necessary, being able to help frame your shot around a model in a way that's more flattering maybe without having to give them instruction can be very advantageous. So,
and thanks to your assistance, I think I got the best shot of the con of our role, so thank you.
Oh yeah. Anyway, here are the main categories of topic that I'll be covering going through. Always keep in mind it's basically going to be some standard rules that are going to be applying to any kind of pose that you're doing, regardless of your character, regardless of your acting, etc. Stock poses is just going to be a list of some things that I think generally work for a very large amount of characters, and basically just some stuff to keep in mind where you blank out on the basics, you blank out on your references or your poses. Here's some things where maybe you'll remember one or two of these that you can pull out at another convention. Acting and artistry, that section's going to be about different ways that through body language, through stance, and through how your body is arranged alone, you can portray different elements and traits of character within a shoot. Duos and group dynamics, pretty self-explanatory. Everything before that's going to be solo, and then we're going to be running a little bit into how to interact when you're doing things in a group. Flourishes is just a small section at the end for some extra stuff that is a little bit harder to organize and to plan, but can add to a really cool photo or really to a cool pose if you manage to make it work. Anyway, here we go with what I consider to be the very basics applicable to everything. Basic posture. Roll your shoulders, arch your back, straighten your neck. Those are the sort of three main elements of, oh, we are all millennials who slouch with the weight of the world heavy upon our shoulders. Things I always do right before I take a photo. Roll that back. My spine, which is normally like kind of straight like this, arch that forward, and straighten neck. What I do is I just roll my head around a bit, and it's like, oh wow, I am cognizant of where my jaw is facing suddenly. So basically that will allow you to have a much more pristine stance that shows up in photographs to base whatever your pose is going to be. Awareness of limbs. I mentioned having awareness of where your chin is in space and awareness of your back and how it is being positioned. This goes the same way. Basically, you don't want dead fish limbs. Dead fish arms is the phrase that you hear in terms of like describing theater, describing improvisers who don't know what they're doing with their hands. You should be cognizant of what your arms are doing. You can be making an intentional decision to move them, to not, what have you. Right here, I have two photos. One where I had my hands in their natural resting position. It's a nice photo because it's still a good angle taken with a good camera of me, but the one where I am intentionally positioning my arms, even if it's not necessarily a super flattering position for them, is a still much more dynamic and interesting shot because there was clear intention behind the movement of my various limbs for it. I suggest as a part of this thinking of separating your upper arms from your body and your legs from each other, because that removes the temptation to just leave your body parts resting on each other without any thought put into them. Let's see. Your angles versus the camera. This is something that you sort of hear, oh, do a 3/4 angle, rotate yourself slightly. Basically, there are certain angles which show up better in art and photography in terms of being flattering for the average person. I want you to compare, for example, this photo taken at a slight angle through to the camera to something very similar taken straight on. There's a lot more visual intrigue in this first one, and it's a better looking view for my body and the way I am positioned. You're looking at everything on a singular flat plane if you're looking at it straight from the front. That's why photos taken from the front have a tendency to look kind of mugshotty, even when you are doing a dynamic pose. But that slight angle to the side enables you to play with angles in your posing and in your photo more to such an extent that you've done something more interesting. Now, the angle that I recommend aiming for is going to be like around your 20 to 45 degrees, because that way there's enough rotation to make it seem like you've made an intentional artistic decision, but not so much that you start hiding details of your costume. And this is the sort of corollary to that I previously mentioned, and that's if you rotate too far to the side, you start obscuring details of your costume. This is actually something that I noticed coming up a lot when I asked to take a photo of someone just in a hallway because I like their costume, is I'll go up to a Lupin the Third cosplayer, and I'll be like, hey, can I take your photo? And he'll be like, sure. Rotates 90 degrees, sticks out prop gun. And it's like, cool, but now I can't tell that you're Lupin because I can't see your tie and your suit. All I can see is the side of your body and a gun. I'm losing the detail because you've turned too far. So this is basically just my reminder to keep in mind where the camera is in relation to what it is seeing on your body. For example, a lot of the detail in the front of my costume, including the shape of my feather plume, the shape of my little emblem, is completely lost in this photo, despite it being a very good photo, simply because I did not think of the way I posed myself, both angles-wise and with my own limb covering up part of it. That's actually something I do want to touch on briefly, because if you want to fold an arm or a limb as part of your pose to bring in more angles or what have you, do so with the arm or leg that's facing away from the body. Because if you, and I'll display this right quick, say I'm sitting down and I want to have my leg up and do a thinker type pose. If I'm doing this, you can't see anything that's in front of me. I've hidden my outfit because my leg that's close to the camera is the one that's blocking the view. If I do the same pose, but with the leg that's facing away from the camera, I'm suddenly opened up. So basically just always be cognizant of where your body is in position to the rest of your body, making sure that you don't lose any visibility for your costume. Unless, obviously, you're doing it for some kind of intentional artistic reason, which we'll get into. Where is your weight? This is simple. Human beings don't stand straight, sticks coming up from the ground, weight evenly distributed on both feet. That's not our natural bodily stance. We shift from one hip to the other. We walk, shifting weight from side to side. If you want to have a more dynamic, natural-looking stance, just take your hips, lean entirely on one. These positions are very similar, very posing. This one looks a lot more natural, a lot more inviting, for the simple reason that I'm standing very stiffly in this one with my weight on both feet. Here, all the weight's sunk over here. It looks a bit more like I'm just being, still obviously posing, but more caught and frozen in the moment. The element of depth. This basically means, are you having something that exists closer to the camera versus further from the camera? This creates a lot of visual interest. Look at the difference in very similar chat noir poses, and which is, again, more intriguing from an outside viewer perspective, between me just standing and me doing functionally the same thing, but leaning forward slightly. Creating the illusion of depth in an image allows for you to feel more real in terms of the photograph and invites people to look in. Same thing with things that are reaching forward towards the camera, props held out towards the camera, etc. So, with all those elements in mind, create long lines and triangles. This is easy. You can look for shapes here. We have a large swoop. We have another large swoop. We have a triangle that my legs are making. This is an easy way to think about how do I make shapes that look okay and are interesting. Just go, I want my arm up. What angle? Lean into it. Now it's a long angle. A long angle that my entire body is stretched into is going to look a lot nicer than just holding my arm up. Create that longer line. If you want to bend your limbs, that's when the triangle thing comes in.
So that's why models pose like this? They have one long line.
Instead of posing like this to stretch, pose like this to create that longer line. And same thing with the triangles. If I want to be waving to someone in a photo, this looks awkward. It doesn't look like anything. There's like a weird box corner that's happening on my arm. Versus this, I've now created a triangle sort of shape. And that looks, again, a lot more like how a human is standing and moving. With all that in mind, I can show you how to quickly cheat any pose that looks good if someone decides to come up to you and say, hey, can I take your picture? If I can have a volunteer, I will show you a method that will always end up.
I'll do it.
Get up here.
Just let me take this off first.
Yeah, this is just a couple simple steps that I go through in my head if I haven't thought about poses for a character, but someone's like, hey, let me snap. And that is, all right, I'm going to put all my weight balanced on one side. Just do that, all the way on one side. I'm going to put one foot closer to the camera. All right, I'm going to put one arm closer to the camera. I am going to create either a triangle somewhere on my body or a line somewhere on my body. And now I'm going to lean or do something either forward or backward. There we go. That's just thinking about every slide you were able to just spontaneously generate, no planning, something where it's like, all right, that's something dynamic. That's a lot easier than just a pose.
This would have been better.
Yeah, that would have been great, because it doesn't necessarily have to be your body. You can create a long line going outward like such. But if you see my point, you can use these simple steps and then just generate something that looks good from nothing by thinking of those basic concepts that you basically always use. Thank you for being my model there. Now, if all of that suddenly goes out of your brain and you're like, wait, what was the step? What do I do with my weight? Does it go to my hands? If you forget about everything, here's just some stock poses I want to go through right quick that frequently work for a large amount of characters. I've mentioned these on my Instagram before. Most of them are pulled from that. But these are the things where when I look through my photos, I find myself using the most often because they are nice, generic, applicable, and easy to remember. First off, I know what they're doing in front of me, and that's the hot dog. This is a good pose for characters who are performers of some sort, or alternatively just, you can do that. It's a classy thing, just like, hello. Anyone can do that, as long as you're not like an action hero or a vaguely personable character. It's a very social pose. We're inviting someone in, you're drawing the audience in. You are using, when you do this pose, the idea of creating a long line, you're extending your body forward, and you're especially using depth as the main draw of this image by having one element towards, one element away. You can combine this with any number of things, including triangle outward, things like that. Embellish upon it how you will. But if you end up thinking to yourself, arm, what it do? Yeah, take this hot dog. It's called that because, I should have explained, if one holds a hot dog in a hand and one offers it to a person, have this hot dog. It might be invisible, but it makes the shape of my hand look neat and gently posed in photographs. Pose number 2, sultry underarm. I use this when I need to be a hot boy, but it also works if you need to be a hot girl. This is a more confident pose, and I want to draw attention to what concepts does it use. Frequently unbalanced weight that you can see here on my Ari. Triangles being created by power stance here and there, but more so, what this does is it automatically creates long lines in and as a part of your body. Basically what you do, simple. Do something to unbalance your weight, or if you're lying down, don't worry about that. And you now have some interesting asymmetry going on. You now have your body posture corrected by extending your spine upwards. And you now have an interesting line or triangle created by the curvature of your arm. This we will talk about later, why this tends to work for more confident characters, but that's something to keep in mind there. Here's something on my chin. Just, your face can be a prop. You can interact. That was a very confident pose. This can be a more introverted pose because it tends to cover things. But this is another way to just use your arms to do something to create triangles. Look at, again, the shapes that are being created with my arms by doing this. And doing any kind of interaction with yourself gives that same feeling of, ah, yes, this is a person interacting in the real world as it does when you have a prop. Because you are not existing as an unrendered figure in the void. You are interacting with something, even if that something is you. Stick the leg out. Kind of covered that before in terms of making sure to not block yourself off as something to keep in mind. But just good generic pose for literally anything that elongates your body, creates, again, long lines, triangles, and makes you, correct your posture a bit because of that leaning back. That's the important thing to keep in mind here, but this can be very dynamic and can look good photographed from a ton of different angles. Let your photographer play with that. The Moe stare. This is a fun one because this is literally just the default girl pose in every visual novel you have ever played. Taylor, can I steal you for this?
Oh, no.
All right. If you need to be a cute anime girl, or if you need somebody else to be a cute anime girl, the easiest thing you can do is just, all right, I'm going to put either my hands in front of me together or behind me together. Your choice. All right, I'm going to arch my back, lean forward, I'm going to tilt my head slightly to the side, I'm going to smile, and then I'm going to shift all my weight to one leg. There we go. We are a cute, demure anime girl now, and I don't even know why this pose works like it does, but it's just that thing when like Party Suzumiya comes up on the cover of something like "Hello, friend," or any of the Clan girls, they all do it. You can sit down. I wanted you to use you to illustrate that, yes, anyone truly with the right posing can be the cute anime girl. The haughty head tilt, this is just my brand. I also call this the knife cat pose, because if you've seen that photo of like the cat with the knife being like, yes, that, yeah. Everyone always says, oh, angles from below, you shouldn't shoot angles from below because that makes people look bad. It's like, no, angles from below look bad when the person didn't know you were shooting from below, or if the photographer didn't know how to pose around it. When you're making it very clear and intentional that the angle is shooting from below by like looking down at the camera all nasty, like, yeah, I see that you're shooting me from an unflattering angle. Do you think that will affect me? That's the attitude that you go into with this. This is good for, again, haughty characters, high power characters, high power being, again, a concept we're going to talk about later. But again, this is just something that frequently go into. Stair sits. Stairs are great. Stairs are at every convention. Not great to walk up, but great to sit on because they help your body create levels. If you are tired of shapes and figuring out how to make your body do things, by nature of sitting on a step, you're already making your body do interesting things that it wasn't doing when you were standing. One thing I always keep in mind is just make sure your legs are sitting on different steps to create those levels and that differentiation, but you can use stairs in your favor. Just pop a sit, lots of horizontal lines, vertical lines being used to draw visual interest by a photographer who knows how to work their way around the camera. You can use it a lot. Now, we're going to move into our next section, which is acting, but acting based on not physical facial expression and not based on emotion or pretending like you're showing an emotion, but this is a posing panel, so we're going to focus on how a whole body posing and positioning can be used to act, per se, in a photo. First, I want to talk about one concept of photography, specifically cosplay photography, of are you taking a photo portrait or are you performing in a photo? Are you playing a character? This is a nice pose with like some interesting angles, some triangles going on, just like a good angle. It's a nice pose. But also, you could put any character into this pose and it would look like a nice pose. There's nothing unique about this or my framing that is specific to this character. You look at this character in the pose alone, not their design, and you don't get any idea about their attitude or what's going on there. Portrait style photography. I want nice full body shots that show off lots of detail and that show me, the cosplayer, off as a model, not necessarily the character. If you want to do more performative cosplay photos that have a bit more narrative to them, you're going to want someone who focuses more in performance style photography or photography that has that element of narrative to it. And what I mean by that is photo cosplay where you're just like, all right, there's an element of acting, there's interaction here. There's posing and there's expression being involved that are like, all right, I don't know what this is telling me about the character, but this is telling me something. I'm getting some vibes that are very different from just a generic stance. By physically performing and changing how you are positioned within the frame, you are conveying either one mood or the other. And before you schedule a photo shoot with your photographer, it's helpful to think about, all right, which of these vibes do I want more of? Because I know some photographers who every photo they take is it's like a frame from the anime or the game. They like doing these big atmospheric things. They like having people interact with the world around them. And I know some photographers who just do glamour shots. They're both equally valid, but we are going to be focusing in this section on acting on more performative elements and how to convey that. So, you heard me before mention the term high power. High power is an acting term or a character description term, which basically means a character who not necessarily has physical power or physical strength, although that can often be the case, but a character who thinks of themselves as higher on the status, or who exists on a higher status than the rest of the characters. A character who is maybe confident, a character who's maybe a bit brash or angry or very stereotypically masculine. All of these other things are factors that are very high power, high performance, etc. And you can basically look at any character and go, all right, so in relation to the other characters in this show or movie or game, is this a higher powered character compared to the others or a lower powered character? And that will give you an idea of the kind of positioning that you can think of using for them. Now, in terms of body language, what conveys a higher powered character, which again, a lot of like royal characters will fall into. Characters that have like anger, or characters who are not necessarily angry or powerful or confident, but who are very, very passionate. Basically, strong emotions and emotions that aren't hidden, emotions that are very out there and viewable. And how you convey those emotions being out there and those emotions being easily and strongly read and shown is often by physically opening up your body in some way. Like you can see with my punk Bakugo over here, we have the double sultry underarm. But in a less humorous way, what I have done is I've very much opened my body physically to the camera from its perspective. I am having things on display. This is not a character who has some kind of secret conniving plan he's hiding. This is not a character who is worried to show himself off in front of people. This is a character who's conveying confidence. And by making yourself open and vulnerable to the world around you and not flaking in that, you are displaying that confidence. Same thing with Gilgamesh, having, again, I'm faced so that my chest is more faced open towards the camera, but also the separation of the legs, the separation of the arms, that conveys a more open, confident stance. In addition to, we mentioned the haughty head tilt, that's what this does as well. If you're photographed from a lower angle that allows you to look down on something, such as when you tilt your head back, oh look, peasants, that shows how your character thinks of themselves in terms of their status, in terms of their society. So think of angles photographed from below, body open to the world, character looking down, and a character with a very, very sharp angles. You see how squared my shoulders are, accented by my fur coat. You see how out there and stuck the triangles are and how sharp those angles are. More sharpness equals more intent and more power put forth in your expression.
I think they shot Thanos in the Avengers in that fashion, because the camera was always looking up at him.
Absolutely, yeah. Filmmaking uses that a lot. Low power. Low power poses, you'll see how immediately both of these photos have softer lines and curves to them. Instead of, on this young Victor photo, my arm being out in extreme triangles here, things are less hyper-angled, more softer and curved towards my body. My photograph is taken from a slightly above angle instead of from a slightly below angle, because I am not looking down on anyone. I am not feeling haughty. It's supposed to be a very vulnerably framed, more youthful look on this character and photograph. And also, moving on, whereas a high power stance and a high power portrayal is all about opening yourself up to the world, a low power stance is frequently about closing yourself off. You can do that via props, you can do that via your body, you can do that via not straightening your shoulders but instead bringing them more inwards. All these convey a low power character, which is a character who maybe has some shyness, or who is at a physically, economically lower status, lower place, was brought up with some anxieties, or even characters who are often evil or villainous, or characters who are sneaky or secretive. Those are characters who are hiding something and who are hiding their true intents. They can be very high power. They can also be very low power. Think about the difference in villainy between like an I'm going to take over the world villain, which would be very high power, versus a character who's like the king's advisor Jafar. He's just whispering secrets. He's doing that kind of villainy. That would be a very lower power character, and it would be strange to portray them in those opposite manners. So, determine which fits your character better and consider modifying your movements as such. Verisimilitude. That's a long word that basically means how relatable is your action or the thing being photographed to something in real life. In the context of posing, it means, are you interacting with something in a way that a human interacts it? This can be via props, anything else. I have long hair here. I have a character who is normally seen with the hair pulled back into a ponytail. Anyone who has had long hair or done a ponytail knows how that action works and what kind of action that is. You are immediately creating a moment that feels relatable, a moment that feels real, and a moment that feels not posed by recreating an action that people can relate to. We're going to go more into this with other kinds of props, but basically that's what the concept is. Showing someone in the middle of a common action or a common circumstance doesn't feel as posed as someone just in the void doing such, even if it is very deliberately posed like this was. I did so many takes of this photo to get it to look right, but it doesn't look like I did. It looks like it was captured in a moment. And if you can get your character to look like they were captured in a moment instead of placed there by a photographer or a director, you have already done a huge, huge, huge step into the favor of portraying your character as a character in a narrative instead of someone standing in a void. Now, on that level, I want to talk about prop interaction and how you interaction. This is going to be mostly about canon props, by which I don't necessarily mean appears in canon, but things your character would interact with. This is, your character has a sword, you made a sword, good, let's go. But I specifically want to mention, if you have a prop, it's not enough often to just hold that prop and to have it be present in front of you. It changes the mood completely when you actually interact with it. These two photos are a good illustration of that. This is a nice photo, the pose is nice, the photography is nice, but the bird I'm holding is just sort of there. It's not adding anything to the photo by its presence other than, oh shit, that's a bird. Whereas in this photo, you can see that I'm actually interacting with it. I'm treating the bird as if it is an object that is present in my space, and I'm reacting to it as a character would react and frame themselves around something in their environment like this. This is a very nice portrait style photo. This is a nicer storytelling and acting photo. Prop interaction, improvisational. Your character doesn't have a prop. Your character doesn't have a sword. You can't find anything around you to interact with. You can interact with anything. I'm standing in a shower and that's a shower curtain. It doesn't necessarily have to be something canon. You don't even necessarily have to be able to tell what it is. I've definitely had photo shoots where it's just like, I'm not sure what to do with my hands. There's nothing I can interact with to make it look natural. I've already done things with my hair. Oh dang, here's like a spool of ribbon from my old cosplay lying on the ground. I'm gonna twist that around and do like some rhythmic gymnastics or whatever. It's fun. If it looks cool, you can use it. Especially things that are vague, like pieces of cloth or flower petals, ribbons, something that has a very changeable flowing shape. Those are good things just to keep and hold around because you can use them to add a lot of dynamicness. Because again, imagine just this photo, but without me interacting with anything. It's just my face standing and that weird angle in the shower. Like, it's still a cool photo with cool lighting, but it's not nearly as intriguing as me interacting with something. You might not even know what that something is, but it still gives more of a performance and attitude to the character. Prop interaction, environmental. Again, there's always stuff around you. Nothing you can pick up. How about a train? How about those stairs? You can figure out a way to interact with something. You can interact with a wall and do that late 90s edgy anime boy lead. This is me interacting with my environment. Me standing like this, that's fine for a photo that looks posed. Me standing like this creates, again, more of that moment and narrative that you're looking for in photos when you're trying to act something out. Duo and group dynamics. Now that we got sort of that covered out the way, what are some things that you need to keep in mind when you're working with other people? First off, posing as a unit. If you are in a cosplay group with people, it helps to actually think of yourselves as being a group instead of as being 2 or 3 or 5 different cosplayers each doing their own thing. Here's a photo of my same group of cosplayers. Here we are all each doing good poses that fit our characters. I'm doing a cute thing as Cheryl, she's doing a cute thing as Ronka, Alto's being Alto. If each of us was photographed on our own, this would be a really nice haul shot. However, when we each adjust ourselves so that we are posing holistically and thinking about our angles and how the camera's facing us as a group, we get a much more dynamic, interesting, nicely posed photo. You can see the adjustments were made. Here, I'm standing a little bit away from the group. I'm faced in an opposite direction. There's nothing connecting my pose with the group in this photo. Here, I angled myself so I was facing outward, so I was as a part of them in a more back-to-back and closer in. It brought me back into the group and helped with that unit. And then we had some similar theming going on. All right, we're all raising one arm and interacting with an object. We have some unity going on. We all look like we are holistically part of the same thing, instead of just people from the same thing standing next to each other. Cheating out. I want to bring another person from the audience to that. May, you want to hop up here? Cheating out is something that's very simple. It's a theater term that means keeping your rotation with the audience in mind. For example, in this photo, me and my friend, we are both standing very close to each other and talking. When you do that in real life, you do that like this. You stand really close to each other. But look, you can't see any of our costumes. You can't see anything that's happening. Whereas you can see plenty of the front of our costumes in this photo and it doesn't look weird. That's because we stood like this and talked to each other, which is not how two people talking to each other stand. But it's a good way to convey that when you are on a stage or in front of an image. You can sit now. But that goes again back into your aim, just making sure you're always visible. The thing is, it's easy to forget that when you're working with another person because you're only thinking about interacting with that person and your own dynamic. So just always good thing to keep in mind when you're taking a group shot or a duo shot is, are we posed in a way that everyone is actually visible, that no one is turned too far? Levels. Levels basically means exactly what it sounds like it means, and that is introducing visual interest by having people being at different heights. Not by standing and having their natural height differences work like me and May were a second ago, but instead by having one person be physically positioned on a different level of ground or doing something else. It allows the gaze of the person looking at the photo to go over it in an arc, look at the thing more holistically, and it often creates a really nice frame-in-frame of how people are arranged in the larger rectangle of the space. It fills the space in a much more interesting way than two people just standing next to each other or sitting next to each other. Because guess what? We said that diagonals were more interesting before. Now we're creating diagonals but with whole people and how they're standing instead of just with parts of their bodies. Coordination. This is something that you can do to make a group shot just look neat. Basically, when I mentioned, oh, in this photo, we all have a prop we're interacting with and an arm that we are holding up in the air to do that. That's the same thing taken to a greater extent here. All right, we're all doing a jumping pose. Or for example, if you're doing like a Sailor Moon lineup, where we're all like in the line and you're doing the leggy out. Yes, that's a bit less visually interesting than doing a casual interactive thing, but that amount of coordination when you are working with a large group of people can have a very nice look and feel to it. It looks very intentional and posed, yes, but it's also visually interesting because, like, why do we like watching like Michael Jackson style choreographed dance routines so much? Because it's neat to see a group of people working together towards doing the same thing. Dialogue. Obviously, photos can't talk outside of the realm of Harry Potter, but one thing you can do to make something feel more in the moment is create yourself a scenario or a photo that looks like people could be talking and imagine what they would be saying and how their bodies would be positioned. Creating artificial dialogue allows people to imagine the dialogue that would be there and create their own narrative around the photograph, which people love being able to look at your photos and read their own headcanons into it and see their own involvement, especially if it's from a show that they like or characters that they like. That's the kind of content that makes people like want to comment on something or share it with others. So like, look how cute this is. Think about it less as these two characters just interacting, but more as, all right, how would they be conversing? How would we invite them to converse? And now, pure narrative. This is one of my favorite photos from a Monster Prom shoot that my friends and I did, because you're like, all right, it's two characters posing, it's on these characters posing. All right, we have the guy taking a selfie. He's an idiot and he's taking it himself. You have a little bit of a story being conveyed in this. You can do this just for like the recreation of kind of a meme, which is what we did here. But any kind of photograph that involves multiple elements being noticed in a sort of order is going to hold someone's attention for far longer than just a photograph of the four of us standing in a line. Even if people don't necessarily notice the phone thing, still seeing that different kind of interaction and dynamic makes it look like a moment from the game or from a show about these people. It makes them look like they are real people doing something, instead of just look at a photo of these people in costumes. Flourishes. These are some steps that can be taken on top of posing that require a bit more planning and effort. These are things that you're less likely to be able to do when you're just taking photos with friends in a hallway, but that you can do and I have seen done. Because it's often just, I see an opportunity, I'm going to take it, I've been inspired and I'm going to use this inspiration point in a cool way. Motion. That's a pretty easy one to do, although it can take lots of effort on the part of a photographer. Do you have a cape? Do you have a dress? Do you have a wig that you can flip? Can you do some kind of flourish with a shutter on fast speed to get something to look like it's moving? That's obviously something that adds a lot of verisimilitude and is a very interesting visual draw to a photo. Can you make motion happen? Do you have a photographer willing and patient enough to capture said motion? Go for it if that element is there. Symbolism. We were taking photographs of this costume and saw weird feathery shadows coming from my feathery shoulder plates and said, all right, I'm going to position this in a way that it looks like a wing because it's agape feed, which is like angelic love. There it goes. Symbolism. We did it.
Like a backdrop on the floor or something?
No, that's shadows. I'm lying down. This is the floor of MomoCon. And I did, after we got it, I enhanced it in Photoshop. I added the secondary wing to it after we had already done that. But imagine like everything from this little line I'm drawing backwards was just what was created. Because we said, this looks like a wing, I'll fix it up later. But, hooray! We've got ourselves a fun little Easter egg in this photo that people are going to like and appreciate. We've posed around a thing, we've used our environment in such a way that we made a photo that would have been nice, not only nice, but intriguing. Gimmick. Gotta plan this out in advance, but they're fun. If you figure out a joke that you can make happen, you can do all your goddamn posing around that joke. If you want to be Phoenix Wright doing objections everywhere you can, that's fun. Fix that, pull it out, people love to see that. One of my favorite gimmicks I've seen was a Boku no Hero group shoot that was at Katsucon, and in every single photo that had more than 6 or 7 people in it, there was just an Aoyama in the corner looking directly at the camera in every one of them, and it was the funniest goddamn thing I'd ever seen. That's a fantastic idea. That's an amazing posing idea. Introduce that fun little element. Because again, it does something beyond just creating a photo where everyone's nicely posed. It creates a photo that is memorable to people. So if you can think of something, or how these characters would interact in a way that is fun and rings true, introduce that. Don't be afraid to use that because it's too silly or because it seems gimmicky. People like gimmicky, it's cosplay. And so after that, I just threw a whole lot of information at people's faces very quickly without a lot of pausing for powering. So what I do want to do is invite some Q&A from people, either about any of the photos and photo shoots you saw me go through there, any questions you have about the concepts of posing in general, feedback for me, whatever. I'd like to open the floor. Yes? All right. I guess we are wrapping it up then. I don't have much more to say on this topic because I just spent 60 minutes shouting at the void.